Humanity had always dreamt of exploring the stars. For centuries, Earth's brightest minds worked together, pushing the limits of science and technology. And when they finally built the first true starship, their dreams became a reality. At first, humanity was welcomed into the vast galaxy. The other civilizations were intrigued, impressed by humanity's determination and ingenuity. But soon, something changed. As Earth's explorers reached further into the galaxy, they discovered something unsettling. Many of the civilizations they encountered were far older and more advanced, and while some were willing to share knowledge, others were quick to judge the humans. They found Earth's ways to be too chaotic, too unpredictable, and at times, even dangerous. Humans did not always follow the strict codes of conduct that governed the galaxy. They were bold, passionate, and often acted before thinking things through. And in the eyes of the galactic leaders, that made them dangerous. One by one, the great galactic civilizations turned their backs on humanity. The once welcoming star systems closed their borders, refusing to allow humans to trade, visit, or communicate with their citizens. Soon, Earth found itself isolated, a forgotten world in a galaxy filled with advanced species that viewed them as little more than troublemakers. Humanity was rejected. The Galactic Council, a governing body made up of the most powerful civilizations, declared Earth unfit to be part of the galactic community. Despite this, humanity did not give up. They were a species built on resilience and hope. Earth's leaders knew they had to find another way to survive in this vast, unknown galaxy. They turned inward, focusing on their own advancements, building new technologies, and preparing for the unknown. Years passed, and Earth's people grew stronger. They became experts in space travel, discovering ways to survive and thrive without the help of the galactic civilizations. They developed new energy sources, learned to repair and build their own ships, and even began to settle on new planets. Earth, once rejected by the stars, now stood as a symbol of human perseverance. But then, something unexpected happened. While exploring the edges of the galaxy, humanity stumbled upon a small, desolate planet, Nix 47. It was located on the outskirts of known space, a forgotten world that had once been home to a thriving alien civilization. The planet was in ruins. Its surface was scorched, and its cities lay abandoned, empty. The only signs of life were a few scattered groups of aliens, barely alive, struggling to survive in a world that had long since turned hostile. These aliens were the Velsari, a race of beings who had once been proud and advanced, but now they were little more than a shadow of their former selves. Their once great civilization had crumbled after a series of wars, and now they were abandoned, left to die by the other galactic species. The Velsari had no allies, no support. They were alone, forsaken by the galaxy that had once admired them. As humanity's explorers arrived on Nix 47, they saw the suffering of the Velsari. They saw the broken remains of a once proud race, struggling to survive on a dying planet. The humans knew what they had to do. They could not turn their backs on these beings, just as they had been turned away. They had experienced rejection, and they knew what it felt like to be abandoned. Captain Elias Vance, leader of the human expedition to Nix 47, stood on the planet's surface and made a vow to the Velsari. "We will not abandon you," he said. "We will help you rebuild. You are not alone." The Velsari were confused at first. Why would humans, who had been rejected by the galaxy, help them? The Galactic Council had abandoned them, cast them aside like they were nothing. Why would the humans do anything differently? But Captain Vance was resolute. Humanity's mission was not just about survival. It was about doing what was right. Even if the galaxy would not help the Velsari, humans would. They would bring food, medicine, and technology. They would help them rebuild their cities, restore their culture, and give them hope for a future. The Velsari watched in disbelief as humans set to work. They brought food, water, and supplies to the alien race, who had been starving for so long. Human engineers worked tirelessly to repair the planet's damaged infrastructure, while scientists studied the unique biology of the Velseri to help them find a way to heal their dying world. Despite the humans' efforts, the Velseri were still hesitant. Could they trust the humans? They had been abandoned by everyone else. Why would these strangers care about them? But as time passed, the Velseri began to realize something. The humans were different. They didn't care about power or status. They didn't care about the opinions of the Galactic Council. They only cared about helping those in need. And that was something the Velseri had not experienced in a long, long time. Nix 47 was a planet on the brink of destruction. It had once been home to the mighty Galsari, a race known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and beautiful cities. But those days were long gone. The planet's once thriving forests were now barren, the rivers dried up, and the skies were thick with dust. The air itself felt heavy, filled with the lingering memories of a civilization that had fallen apart. When humanity first landed on Nix 47, the sight that greeted them was nothing like the vibrant, bustling world the Velseri had once known. The cities were in ruins, their towering spires reduced to rubble. Buildings that had once been marvels of architecture now lay abandoned, their halls echoing with the silence of those who had fled or perished. The humans were shocked by the desolation, but they did not hesitate. They had come to help, and they would do everything in their power to restore what had been lost. As the human team made their way through the wreckage, they saw the Velseri, weak, tired, and broken. Most of them were huddled together in small groups, hiding from the harsh winds that tore across the barren land. Their bodies were frail, their once glorious skin now dull and pale. The humans could see the deep lines of pain and worry etched on their faces. The leader of the human expedition, Captain Elias Vance, could hardly believe what he saw. He had read about the Velseri, their once great empire, and their remarkable achievements. But standing in front of him were a people who had lost everything. There was no pride left in their eyes, only despair. "I can't believe what's happened here," one of the human engineers said, shaking his head. "How could a civilization fall this far?" Vance didn't respond immediately. He was too focused on the task at hand. He turned to his team, giving them instructions to set up camp and begin bringing supplies. But as he looked back at the Velseri, he felt a deep sense of sympathy. He knew that they needed more than just food and shelter. They needed hope. The first few days were difficult. The Velseri didn't trust the humans at first, and who could blame them? After all, the rest of the galaxy had abandoned them without a second thought. The humans, on the other hand, were determined to prove that they were different. They offered what little they had, setting up makeshift shelters and giving the Velseri food and medicine. It was not much, but it was a start. As the humans continued to work, they began to understand just how dire the situation was. The planet's ecosystem was on the verge of collapse. The soil had turned infertile, and the crops the Velseri once grew with ease could no longer survive. The rivers, once teeming with life, were now empty, with only a few puddles of stagnant water remaining. The air, thick with dust, was slowly choking the life out of everything. Captain Vance gathered his team to discuss the next steps. "We need to do more than just help them survive. We need to restore their planet," he said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "If we're going to make a real difference, we need to understand what went wrong and find a way to fix it." The human scientists worked day and night, studying the soil, the water, and the atmosphere. They quickly realized that the damage to Nix 47 was not just the result of natural disasters. The planet had been ravaged by war between the Velseri and a powerful enemy that had left scars all over the land. The Velseri had used their advanced technology to fight back, but in doing so, they had destroyed much of the planet's delicate balance. The humans didn't give up. They knew that restoring Nix 47 would be a monumental task, but they were not the kind of people to shy away from a challenge. They had faced their own struggles on Earth, wars, famine, and countless hardships, but they had always found a way to overcome them. Now, it was time to do the same for the Velseri. As the days turned into weeks, the humans began to make progress. They built water filtration systems to purify the planet's remaining water sources. They introduced new farming techniques, using hydroponics and other advanced methods to grow crops in the barren soil. Slowly but surely, the planet began to show signs of recovery. The skies, once dark and polluted, began to clear, and the once dead trees began to sprout new leaves. Still, it wasn't easy. The Velseri were proud people, and they struggled with the idea of depending on outsiders for help. Some of them even resisted the humans' efforts, believing that their race had lost its place in the galaxy and that nothing could restore their former glory. But Captain Vance and his team didn't give up. They understood the importance of patience and empathy. They worked alongside the Velseri, not as conquerors, but as partners in rebuilding. Gradually, the Velseri began to change their minds. They saw the humans not as invaders, but as allies, people who cared about them and their future. Slowly, the trust between the two races began to grow. It wasn't long before the first signs of hope appeared. The Velseri, once a dying race, began to rebuild their cities. The lights that had once been extinguished flickered back to life. And in the hearts of the Velseri, a new sense of purpose began to take root. Nix 47 was still a long way from being restored to its former glory, but it was no longer a lost cause. With humanity's help, the planet had begun to heal. And in doing so, the Velseri had found something they thought they had lost forever: hope. The Velseri were slowly adjusting to the humans' presence on Nix 47. For the first time in years, their world was showing signs of recovery. The skies were clearer, the air fresher, and the once barren land was starting to grow crops again. But despite these improvements, there was still tension. The Velseri had long been a proud race, and accepting help from an outsider, especially humans, who had been rejected by the galaxy, was not easy. Captain Elias Vance could see the resistance in their eyes. It was not just distrust, but the weight of centuries of pride and pain. The Velseri were used to being the ones who offered help, the ones who stood at the top of the galaxy, respected and powerful. Now, they were in a position of weakness. It was hard for them to accept that they needed the help of a race that had been turned away by the rest of the galaxy. But Captain Vance knew that time would change things. He had seen it before on Earth. People, no matter how proud, would always come to see the truth when their survival depended on it. And the truth was that humanity was there to stay, not as conquerors, but as helpers. The humans were working day and night to restore the planet, and with each passing day, the Velseri began to see the fruits of their labor. But the Galactic Council was not pleased. They had already made it clear that humanity was to stay away from Nix 47 and any other civilization in need. The Council had long viewed humans as a disruption, a wild card that threatened their carefully constructed order. They had no intention of allowing Earth's people to become too powerful or too influential. One morning, a message arrived from the Galactic Council. It was a warning, clear and firm. Humanity is not authorized to interfere with Nix 47. You are to cease all assistance to the Velseri immediately. Failure to comply will result in serious consequences. The humans on Nix 47 were taken aback. They had expected some resistance from the Council, but they had not expected this level of hostility. Captain Vance was the first to speak. "We will not abandon them," he said, his voice steady but firm. "We will not leave the Velseri to die, not after everything we've done for them." The humans knew what was at stake. They had already given the Velseri hope. They had shown them that it was possible to rebuild, to recover from even the deepest wounds. But if they were to obey the Council's order and leave, everything they had worked for would be lost. Days passed, and the situation grew more tense. The Velseri, who had been skeptical at first, now began to feel a sense of gratitude towards the humans. They saw the work the humans had done, the sacrifices they had made. And for the first time in years, they allowed themselves to believe that maybe they had a future. Maybe they could survive. But the Council was relentless. A second message arrived, this time more threatening. "You have been warned. If you continue to defy the Council, we will take action. The Velsuri are not your responsibility. Captain Vance understood the gravity of the situation. The Council had the power to erase entire civilizations, to wipe them off the map with a simple command. They could destroy Nix-47, and humanity would have no way to stop them. The decision was clear: stand up for what was right, or walk away and leave the Velsuri to their fate. The humans were divided. Some argued that they should leave, that defying the Council could mean the end of humanity's place in the galaxy. Others believed that standing by the Velsuri was the only right choice. The debate raged on, but one thing was clear: the humans would not back down easily. "We can't let fear control us," Captain Vance said, rallying his team. "We didn't come all this way to give up now. We are going to stand by the Velsuri. And if the Council wants to come for us, then they will have to face the consequences." The humans knew the risks, but they also knew they could not abandon the Velsuri. They had seen too much, learned too much about the suffering of this once proud race, and they had come to care for them. Leaving now would be a betrayal. With renewed determination, the humans prepared for the worst. They fortified their position on Nix-47, setting up defensive systems and preparing to protect the Velsuri from whatever the Council might throw at them. They were ready to fight, not for power, but for the lives of the people they had sworn to help. As tensions rose, something unexpected happened. The Velsuri, who had been reluctant to accept help from the humans, now stood by their side. They understood what was at stake. The humans had given them hope, and they would not let the Council take that away. For the first time in centuries, the Velsuri felt the stirrings of pride once more. They were not going to stand by and let their rescuers be destroyed. A line had been drawn in the sand. Humanity had made its choice, and the Velsuri had made theirs. They would stand together, no matter what the Council or any other power in the galaxy thought. It was not just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for their right to exist, to rebuild, and to thrive once again. The humans had come to Nix-47 to help, and now they were ready to defend it, no matter the cost. As the days passed on Nix-47, the situation became more intense. The Velsuri had begun to rebuild their cities, their hopes rising with every tree that grew and every crop that sprouted. For the first time in years, they felt a glimmer of hope. They no longer saw their planet as a dying world, but as a place that could be restored. The humans had given them that hope, but the looming threat of the Galactic Council hung over them like a shadow. Captain Elias Vance watched the growing tension among his crew. They had worked tirelessly, pouring their hearts and souls into helping the Velsuri, and now the Council demanded they leave. Humanity had been warned twice to stay away from Nix-47, yet the humans refused to back down. It was not just about helping the Velsuri anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. The message from the Galactic Council had been clear: stop your interference with the Velsuri. If you continue, there will be consequences. Despite this, the humans did not leave. They continued to work alongside the Velsuri, helping them to heal, rebuild, and reclaim their place in the galaxy. As time passed, something remarkable began to happen. The other civilizations in the galaxy, who had once rejected humanity, began to take notice. The Velsuri were not the only species that had been abandoned. There were other worlds, other races, who had been forgotten, cast aside by the so-called superior civilizations of the galaxy. The humans had shown a different way. They had not turned their backs on the Velsuri. They had given them a second chance. Word spread quickly throughout the galaxy. The news of humanity's actions on Nix-47 reached even the farthest corners of space. It was impossible to ignore the growing movement of support that was beginning to take shape. Small, forgotten civilizations began to reach out to Earth, asking for help, hoping that humanity's kindness and bravery might be their salvation as well. But the Galactic Council was not pleased. They saw the rising movement as a threat to their authority, a challenge to their control over the galaxy. If humanity's actions were allowed to continue, it would set a dangerous precedent. The Council feared that other races would begin to question their authority, perhaps even revolt against their rule. A series of harsh statements were issued, condemning humanity's actions and warning other races not to follow their example. But instead of silencing the growing support for humanity, the Council's efforts only fueled it. The more they tried to suppress the movement, the more it spread. It was clear now that humanity's actions on Nix 47 were not just about helping one dying species. They were sparking a fire that could change the entire galaxy. Captain Vance knew this was a turning point. Humanity had become the symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope for the forgotten races. The humans were no longer alone in their fight. They had allies now, other species, long ignored by the Galactic Council, who were willing to join them. These races had suffered under the Council's rule for too long, and they were ready for a change. One evening, as the sun set over the reconstructed cities of Nix 47, a message arrived from an unexpected source. It was a transmission from a small planet in the Outer Rim, a world that had once been a powerful ally of the Galactic Council but had since fallen out of favor. The leader of that planet, a young female diplomat named Alara, had sent a bold and defiant message to Captain Vance. "We stand with you," the message began. "We see what you're doing for the Velsari, and we believe in your cause. The Council has long been corrupt, and it is time for change. We will not sit idly by while they continue to oppress the innocent." The message was clear. Alara and her people were joining humanity in their defiance against the Council. It was the first real act of rebellion against the Council's rule, and it was a sign that the galaxy was beginning to shift. The Council had underestimated the power of compassion, the strength of those who refused to turn a blind eye to suffering. Captain Vance's heart swelled with pride. Humanity had not only helped the Velsari, they had sparked a movement that was spreading across the stars. More and more civilizations began to speak out, voicing their support for the humans' actions. They were no longer alone in their struggle. They had become the leaders of a growing coalition of the forgotten, those who had been left behind by the powerful forces of the Galactic Council. But the Council would not go down without a fight. They had vast resources at their disposal, and they would not allow this rebellion to grow any further. But the humans, with their newfound allies, were ready to face whatever challenges came their way. As Captain Vance stood on the surface of Nix 47, watching the stars above, he knew the fight was far from over. But he also knew that humanity had found its place in the galaxy. They had become the spark that would ignite a fire of change. They were no longer outcasts, they were leaders, and they would not stop until the galaxy was a place where no one, no matter their race or status, was abandoned or forgotten. The fight for the future had just begun. And humanity, standing side by side with their new allies, was ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy was in turmoil. The Galactic Council's grip was loosening, and it was becoming clear that the balance of power was shifting. Humanity, once seen as insignificant by the galaxy's most powerful factions, had now become a symbol of rebellion, compassion, and defiance. The message had spread. It was possible to challenge the system, to fight for the weak, and to stand up for what was right. On Nix 47, the humans and the Velsari worked side by side, restoring the planet and strengthening the alliance between their races. The cityscapes that had once been rubble now buzzed with life as new buildings rose, and green life began to cover the barren land. It was no longer just about survival. It was about rebuilding, about creating a future where hope and compassion could thrive. Captain Elias Vance sat in his office, looking out at the skyline of Nix 47's capital. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the city's new beginnings. But Vance could not shake the weight of the growing conflict. The Galactic Council had made it clear that they would not tolerate any more interference in their control over the galaxy. Yet, as the days passed, more and more races were sending their support to humanity's cause. One such race, the Henari, had long been under the thumb of the Council. Known for their sharp intellect and mastery of technology, the Henari had been reduced to a vassal state, serving the Council's needs. But now, they were reaching out to the humans, offering both their advanced technology and their knowledge. The Heneri believed in humanity's vision of a galaxy where all races could stand equal and free, not ruled by a single oppressive body. "Captain," a voice interrupted Vance's thoughts. It was Commander Leela Hawk, the second in command of the human expedition. "There's news from the Heneri. They're ready to meet with us." Vance nodded, his expression serious. "Prepare the team. We need to discuss our next steps." The meeting with the Heneri was held in one of the newly constructed buildings in the heart of the capital. The Heneri delegation, led by their leader, Talius, was wary but hopeful. Talius, with his tall frame and pale blue skin, had always been a fierce advocate for his people's freedom. When the Heneri first reached out to the humans, they were nervous about the consequences. But after hearing of humanity's actions on Nix 47, they realized they had found kindred spirits in the humans. Talius spoke first. "We have watched you from afar, Captain Vance. You have shown the galaxy what true strength looks like, not in weapons or force, but in the willingness to do what is right, no matter the cost." Vance inclined his head in acknowledgement. "We are not fighting for power or control. We are fighting for the right of every race to thrive without fear of oppression. We can't allow the Galactic Council to decide who gets to live and who gets left behind." Talius' expression grew more intense. "The Council has suppressed us for too long. Our people have been broken by their greed and their desire for control. But we are ready to join you. Together, we can stand against them and bring about a new era for the galaxy." The humans were no longer fighting alone. With the Heneri at their side, they had gained a powerful ally. But they also knew the Council would not give up without a fight. The battle that was coming would not be easy. The Council's reach was vast, and their resources were nearly limitless. As the meeting continued, plans began to take shape. The Heneri would provide advanced weaponry and defense systems, while the humans would offer their unique knowledge of diplomacy and strategy. The Velsari, with their resilience and strength, would join in, bringing their own technology and expertise in planetary restoration. It was an alliance built on mutual respect, a partnership that was stronger than the sum of its parts. Together, they would fight not just for Nix 47, but for the entire galaxy. They would stand as a beacon for those who had been oppressed, those who had been forgotten, and they would make sure that no one would ever be left behind again. But the Council was not idle. As the rebellion grew, so did the Council's resolve. They called for reinforcements, rallying their allies and preparing to crush the rising movement before it could take root. The next battle would be one for the future of the galaxy. Captain Vance stood in front of his team, looking each of them in the eye. "We are fighting for more than just survival now," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "We are fighting for freedom, for the right of every race to exist without fear. The Council will try to break us, but we will not fall. Not now. Not ever." The humans, the Velsari, and the Heneri stood united. The sparks of rebellion had caught fire, and the flames were spreading. The galaxy was changing, and there was no turning back. The forces of oppression would not hold them back any longer. The battle for the galaxy was just beginning. And humanity, standing with its newfound allies, would lead the charge toward a future where no one would be left behind. The rebellion had gained momentum, and with each passing day, the forces of the Galactic Council grew more desperate. The alliance between the humans, the Velsari, and the Heneri was stronger than ever, but so was the Council's determination to preserve their power. The stakes had never been higher. On Nix 47, the cities that once lay in ruins now stood tall. Green fields stretched where barren land had been, and the once dying planet seemed to pulse with new life. The Velsari were no longer the broken race they had been. They were thriving, rebuilding, and standing proudly with their human and Heneri allies. The sense of hope that had been sparked by the humans' arrival had spread like wildfire. It was no longer just a dream. It was reality. But the Council would not let that reality stand. They had begun to prepare for a full-scale confrontation. The peaceful movements spreading throughout the galaxy in support of humanity's mission had become too widespread to ignore. The Council feared that if they allowed the rebellion to succeed, it would inspire more races to rise up against their rule. They could not let that happen. Captain Elias Vance sat in his command center, studying the latest reports. The Council was assembling its forces. Reinforcements were on the way, and soon they would be here. The time for diplomacy had passed. The time for war had arrived. "We have no choice," Vance muttered to himself. He turned to his second-in-command, Commander Leela Hawk, who was standing nearby. "Prepare our fleet. The Council is coming." Hawk nodded. "We've fortified the defenses, but we'll need every ship we have. It's going to be a fight like none we've seen before." Vance's mind raced as he considered their options. The humans had the advantage of surprise, but the Council's fleet was vast and powerful. If the Alliance stood any chance of winning, they would need to act quickly and decisively. The humans and their allies had the will to fight for what was right, but that alone wouldn't be enough. They needed strategy, courage, and unity. Meanwhile, the Velseri had grown more confident. Their people had joined the humans in preparations for battle. They had developed new technologies to aid the humans in their efforts, including advanced energy shields and weapons capable of piercing the strongest armor. The Velseri warriors, once a proud race brought low by years of oppression, now stood tall beside the humans, ready to defend their home and their future. And then there were the Heneri. Their contribution was just as vital. Known for their brilliant minds, the Heneri had been key in designing the fleet's advanced technology, which included highly sophisticated defense systems and communication networks. The Heneri's understanding of galactic warfare had helped sharpen the Alliance's strategy, giving them an edge in battle. In the quiet before the storm, Vance met with the leaders of the Velseri and Heneri. They gathered in a high-rise building that overlooked the capital city, the lights of Nix 47 sparkling below them. "We know what's coming," Vance said, addressing the group. "The Council is going to throw everything they have at us. We'll face overwhelming odds, but we can't back down. Not now. Not after everything we'd fought for." Talius, the Velseri leader, stepped forward. His voice was steady, but there was fire in his eyes. "We are not afraid to fight for what we believe in. You gave us hope, humans. We owe you our future. We will stand with you, no matter the cost." Alara, the Heneri diplomat, nodded in agreement. "The Heneri are with you, Captain. The Council's reign is built on fear and control. It's time for that to end. We will fight with you until the very end." Vance's chest swelled with pride. For the first time in his life, he truly felt what it meant to be a part of something greater than himself. It wasn't just about Earth or humanity anymore. It was about standing for every race that had been oppressed, for every world that had been abandoned by the powers of the galaxy. They were fighting for freedom, for the right to exist without fear. "Then it's settled," Vance said, his voice strong. "We fight together. We will show the Council that they can no longer dictate the fate of the galaxy. We will not back down. We will stand for those who cannot stand for themselves." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. The fleet was ready, the defenses were set, and the final strategy had been laid out. It was time to move. The humans, the Velsari, and the Heneri took their positions, knowing that this battle would determine the future of the galaxy. Captain Vance stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the stars outside. He knew this was not just a battle for survival. It was a battle for everything humanity stood for: freedom, compassion, and the belief that every life mattered. The future of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The first ships of the Galactic Council's fleet appeared on the edge of the system, their dark shapes looming ominously against the stars. The battle had begun. "Captain, they're opening fire," Hawk said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. Vance's eyes narrowed. "Then it's time to show them who we are." The humans, Velsari and Heneri, fought side by side, their unity a powerful force that no one could deny. It was not just a fight for Nix 47. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy, and they would not back down. The tipping point had come. The outcome of the battle would decide whether the galaxy would remain under the Council's oppressive rule, or whether it would embrace a new era of freedom, equality, and hope. Humanity had sparked a revolution, and now it was time to see if they could finish what they had started. The battle raged on, a violent clash between the forces of the Galactic Council and the United Rebellion led by humanity. The stars above Nix 47 burned brightly, like silent witnesses to the conflict that would decide the galaxy's future. The humans, Belsari and Heneri, fought with a unity the Council had never expected. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the freedom of every race, for a future where no one would be left behind. Captain Ilias Vance stood on the bridge of the flagship, his hands gripping the console as explosions lit up the black expanse of space. His heart raced, but his mind was calm. The strategy they had put in place was working. The Council's fleet was powerful, but the rebels had something the Council did not: hope, determination, and the will to stand together. "Shields holding steady, Captain," Commander Leela Hawk reported, her voice steady but tense. "The enemy is regrouping, but they're taking heavy losses." "Good," Vance said, his eyes fixed on the view of the battlefield. The rebel forces had successfully pushed back the first wave of Council ships, but the war was far from over. The Council had called in reinforcements, larger and more powerful ships that could turn the tide in their favor. "Prepare for the next wave," Vance ordered. "We have to keep the pressure on them. Don't give them a chance to regroup." But as the battle continued, Vance knew they couldn't just win with brute force. They had to win hearts and minds. Every ship they destroyed, every planet they liberated, was a message to the galaxy. The rebellion was not just about defeating the Council, it was about showing the galaxy that a better way was possible. Meanwhile, on the surface of Nix 47, the Belsari were leading the effort to protect their world. Their warriors fought bravely alongside the humans and Heneri, defending the newly rebuilt cities and their fragile way of life. The once silent streets of the capital now echoed with the sounds of bustling markets and the laughter of children. The Belsari had a future again, one they had never thought possible, until the humans arrived. Talius, the Belsari leader, stood on the front lines, rallying his people. His tall, silver-skinned figure was a symbol of their strength. The Belsari, who had once been cast aside, now fought with pride. They would never allow their planet to fall back into the hands of those who had tried to destroy them. "We fight for our future," Talius shouted to his warriors. "We fight for the freedom of every race in the galaxy. Today, we will show the Council that they cannot control us any longer." The Belsari's battle cry echoed across the battlefield, a powerful reminder of the unity that had been formed between the three races. The humans had given them hope, and now they were giving everything to protect that hope. On the other side of the galaxy, the Heneri were making their move. Using their advanced technology, they had launched a series of surprise attacks on key Council installations. The Heneri's ships moved with precision, their energy weapons cutting through the Council's defenses like a blade through silk. The Council's forces were overwhelmed, unable to counter the Heneri's tactics. Alara, the young Heneri diplomat who had once been a voice of peace, was now leading her people in the fight for freedom. She stood beside her comrades, her eyes focused on the task ahead. She had seen the suffering caused by the Council, and she would not rest until it was over. "We have the momentum," Alara said as she communicated with Captain Vance. "The Council is reeling from our attacks. We can strike their capital and end this once and for all." Vance's voice came over the comms, filled with determination. "We'll join you. We can't waste this opportunity. Together, we'll make sure the Council never rises again." The final phase of the battle had begun. With the Council's forces scattered and their defenses crumbling, the United Rebellion launched a coordinated assault on the heart of the Council's power. The Belsari and the Heneri joined the humans in a final push toward the capital planet of the Galactic Council, where the heart of their corrupt government lay. As the combined fleet entered the atmosphere of the capital planet, the Council's defenses fought back with everything they had. The skies erupted in fire, the air crackling with energy as ships collided, and laser fire lit up the sky. But this time, the forces of the rebellion were not backing down. This time, they fought as one. In the Council's central chamber, the leaders of the oppressive regime watched in horror as the rebellion advanced. Their empire was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The power they had once wielded so easily was slipping through their fingers. But it was too late. The rebellion's forces broke through, and the capital was captured. The Council's leaders were taken into custody, their reign of terror finally coming to an end. Captain Vance stood in front of the newly assembled leadership of the galaxy, humans, Velsari, and Henari all standing side by side. They were no longer just survivors. They were leaders, champions of a new era. The Galactic Council's rule had fallen, and the galaxy had been given a chance to rebuild. "The galaxy is ours to shape," Vance said, his voice filled with hope. "We will build a future where no one is abandoned, no one is forgotten. A future where all races stand equal, free to thrive in peace." And with that, the first steps toward a new era began. The stars above Nix 47 burned brighter than ever, a symbol of the hope and unity that had been forged through the fire of battle. The rebellion had succeeded. The galaxy would never be the same again.